Hello, everyone. Welcome to the CAD platform. I am your CAD president, Kavita, and my name sign is Kavita. And I want to welcome everybody here tonight. And what our topic is the celebrating the 8 Latin American countries' Independence Day. It's the Hispanic Heritage Month. Wow, super impressive. But before we get started, I would like to go ahead and set up our agenda for tonight. First, you guys will watch our two wonderful presenters. Okay, we have Maria Vasquez Lowe, and we also have Roberto Sandoval. Okay, Robs. They're two wonderful presenters, and they'll be presenting for you guys tonight. And before we move forward, you guys will be watching a short video. Once we're done with this video, then we will have a slight commercial break, very brief. It's a very brief commercial, okay? And then we will have the opportunity for you guys to go do a Q&A session. Go ahead and give your questions in the chat, and I will sign your questions. For those of you who would prefer to sign your own questions, you'll have the opportunity to sign your questions in Zoom. Okay, we have the moderator and the Facebook and YouTube. They will all give you the Zoom ID and password, so you guys can go ahead and sign your questions into Zoom once we get to the Q&As. You can ask our two wonderful presenters any questions you'd like. All right, let's start with our video. Hello, my name is Maria.
And Roberto. Hi, again, I'm Roberto, and I was born in San Diego, California. I do identify as a Chicano. And Maria?
Hi, I was born in Querétaro, Mexico, and I grew up there as well. I use LSM. Don't use that much anymore because the school didn't allow us to sign at the time. We couldn't use any other language, so we had to learn English, unfortunately, growing up. So I learned English as my first language, and then ASL.
And this is Roberto speaking. We'd like to take a moment of silence to perform a land acknowledgement and recognize the ancestors and traditional caretakers of the land, many of who still remain on these lands, and I'd like to acknowledge them. Maria?
So now I currently live in Ventura County. And in Ventura County, we have two different tribes. Okay, and we're going to honor these tribes. And the two tribes are the Shumash and the Mazaquan tribes. That's out in Ventura County. And I'd like to honor their traditions and their heritage.
And this is Roberto speaking again. I'm located in Riverside. And the indigenous tribes in my area, which are 4, I will start first with the Cahuila and the Keys, also the Payom-Ka-Wickham tribe and the Tongva tribe. I'd also like to add that on my father's side, we do date back to the Aztec tribe. Now, I do want to mention that I've lost the specific tribe and the location in Mexico that we're from.
This is our agenda. As you can see, we have our agenda here. We will be touching on each of these topics, and we'll also explain the historical events of Mexico and the Mexican independence. We will be talking about all of this today. Communities, we'll do a question and answer. We'll talk about the heritage. And there will be a reference that we will share with you guys later. If you guys want more information, we will have references that we can share, and there will be links there as well for you guys to use.
This is Roberto speaking. Being that we are on indigenous lands, we would encourage folks, if you are part of an event, in your opening ceremonies, please take the time to perform a land acknowledgement and honor the traditional caretakers of the land. For more information, you can use this hashtag #HonorNativeLand, to further inform yourself where there is information located on tribes and how land acknowledgements should be performed. Also, AB 1968 is the Tribal Land Acknowledgement Act of 2020. That is an act that the California legislature has passed in order to recognize the contributions by the ancestral indigenous community. There is also a plaque recognizing this act and can be placed within a classroom, for example. And when classes begin, that plaque can identify the tribes that are local to the area. And at the beginning of a school year, it can be used to recognize those tribes. Now, that act has been passed, and it's in the hands of Congress. And once it does pass, it will be submitted to the governor's office so that it can be formally passed and ratified, which is very nice to know.
Next slide, please.
And this is Roberto speaking. I'd like to cover some identity terms. As you can see, there's a listing right to my side. And in order to create clarity and reduce ambiguity, I'd like to point out what terms we're going to use today. Latin American identifies an individual that is from one of the Latin countries, anywhere from Mexico down to Chile, Argentina, and in that general hemisphere of the planet. It identifies someone who's been born and raised in one of the countries of Latin America and lives in that area. The following term, Hispano or Hispana, as you can see, we have both. One of the words ends in an O and the other in an A. Now, this indicates that they are gendered words. So one is masculine and one is feminine. And these are terms that have been used for quite some time. There was a time when Latin America was known as New Spain, and that's when it was under Spain's rule. So that term, or those two terms, came into use to identify people that had a Spanish heritage. Moving on to the next term, which is Hispanic. There's a current sign like this. It's two fingers brushing against the cheek. This sign is not a new sign, a recently invented sign. This is a well-established sign that stands for Hispanic. I'd like to detail what a Hispanic person is. A Hispanic person is someone who has a Spanish heritage from Spain. And also a key feature is this person uses the Spanish language. In the 90s, there was a second definition added to that term, which meant that a person was most likely Roman Catholic. However, that use of the word has reduced. And again, Hispanic remains a word that indicates a person has either Spanish heritage or is a user of the Spanish language. We'll go on to the next bullet point, which is the word Latino or Latina. Again, we're using both gendered endings. And the sign is like this, an X off the shoulder. Now, this is a person who may have heritage from anywhere within the Latin American countries. It doesn't necessarily mean that the individual speaks Spanish, because it does include, for example, a Latin American country that speaks Portuguese, Belize or Brazil, for example. And it also includes people who are Black and any people who identify as indigenous within those continents that are contained in Latin America. Moving on to the next term, which is Latinx. Now, Latinx doesn't have a formal sign in existence yet. It's typically a word that is spelled out. Now, the X indicates that it's a gender-neutral term. These terms we will use because they're all inclusive, and we do not want to marginalize anyone at the moment. We have more terms on the slide there, which are much older terms that haven't become common in the United States. Again, these are terms that were used in New Spain. One of those is Neo-Mexicanos, and this term is used to identify people that were living in New Mexico, because at that time, New Mexico was a colony of Spain. And there were folks that were from Spain, Spanish folks, that used that terminology. Now, that word in particular is outdated and no longer is in current use. Moving on to the next word, isleño or isleña. Again, this is a term used by the Spanish to indicate any folks of the territories on islands that they may have colonized. I'd also like to add the next bullet point, which is criollo, criolla de Louisiana. Now, a criollo indicates a person that is Creole, which can be Spanish, French, indigenous, Black, and so on. And I'd like to point out and have you notice that there's two different words, isleño, isleña, criollo, criollo. Isleño or isleña was used to indicate a person of lighter skin tone, and criollo and criolla was used to indicate a person of darker skin tone. And I'm unsure if those terms are still in use to this day. Now, we're moving on to the next word, which is Californio. Before California was a state, there were many folks who were from Spain who lived in the area. And again, it's not a word that is still in use, but it is notated on our slide as a historical reference. Moving on to the next word, Tejano or Tejana, indicates an individual that lived in the area of Texas before it had become Texas. And so they were a part of Nueva España, New Spain. And when Mexico had their independence, then Mexico became the country of that land, of that area. And that term, Tejano or Tejana, is a term that is currently still in use. As you can see on the title of the book I just held up. And of course, we're all familiar, most people are familiar with Selena. She is a famous musician. They call her the queen of music, and she still is to this day, the queen of Tejano music. Now, I'm not sure if there's a sign for those words, Tejano or Tejana, but I will be finding out from the Texas Latin community to see if there is a sign for it. Moving on to the next term, and you see it there, Chicana or Chicano. Now, that's the early spelling that predates the CH spelling of Chicano and Chicana. Now, the X there is pronounced as a ch, which indicates a person who is Mexican that was from New Spanish land or New Spain land and was living there for many years. And then when the border issues came in and Mexico broke away from Spain for a time, then the United States took over the territory. And so it's not that the folks have changed, but the border has changed quite a few times. Therefore, the words have changed a bit in their spelling. Now, the CH version of the word Chicano is signed like this, a C tapped on the chest, and it's a word or a term that is still in use today. And there are actually various departments at colleges who study Chicanos. In California, there is a huge population of Chicanos and Chicanas. I'd like to move on to the word Chicanx. Now, again, this is an all-inclusive term that is non-gendered, and we use it today to include everyone because we do not want to marginalize anyone. Again, moving on to the next word is New Yorican, And this is a person from Puerto Rico that is born near New York City. And I'm sure there are many more identities, but we do want to recognize that many cultures and many groups have their own identities. And this is true because our globe is huge and there are many areas and cultures to experience all around it. And I'd like to remind you that not all terms can be used identically. There are different specialized uses. So a general application of the terms could lead to misunderstandings. It's important to identify how to understand how people self-identify and refer to them as such. Like, for example, I want to use this sign, which is a sign for Mexico or Mexican in American Sign Language. This sign does not connect in any way with any of the terms you're seeing on the screen right now. I've seen people use the sign Mexico or Mexican for Latino, for Latina, for Latinx, or Hispanic, and we really want to clear that up. That's not an accurate sign to be used to depict that. In ASL, the sign that I just showed, the number 2, brushing off the forehead, is used for Mexican, and we will be expanding more further by showing the sign from Mexican Sign Language that is used for those terms as well, for Mexico and Mexican. Okay, I just want to be specific there. But for today's presentation, we will be using the following signs: Hispanic, like this on the cheek, and also Latino or Latina. I will be using this sign here, and 2 X's. In Latinx, I will only be spelling that word out. And again, it's just an important reminder that there are similar terms, but they do not mean the same thing. We don't want to misunderstand identities, people's culture, and how they identify. So I'm very grateful that we took the time to explain that and grateful for your attention as well.
Okay, this is Maria. I'm going to let you guys read the historical background, and I'm going to explain. Okay, the historical events. We have the Hispanic Heritage Week. Okay, our Congress decided that they were going to propose a bill. Okay, and it's Public Law 9498. And Lyndon B. Johnson, who was president at the time in 1968, decided to go ahead and pass that bill. Okay, and so we recognize September 17th, 1968 to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Week. And you'll notice they gave us a week was not enough. We need more time to celebrate our heritage. So now we have our Heritage Month, which we clearly are in. We had Congress, we passed the Public Law 100-402. Okay, we proposed that to President Reagan. And, we have different signs for Reagan, right? We have Reagan on the forehead, Reagan, cowboy Reagan, because remember, he used to be a cowboy actor. He was a Western movie star for many years. We also have Reagan. Why? Because, again, he's a movie star. So we have different signs for Reagan. I'll just use this sign for today on the forehead. So he signed Public Law 100-402 in August of 1988 to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month. Okay, and we're going to go into more of these celebrations later. Oh, okay, here we go with our new slide. You'll see some of the pictures here. Okay, so we have Latin music legends. These are our famous Latin music singers. You might know some of these. Some of these individuals may be very familiar to you. In the United States, the post office came up with stamps that they distributed for everybody. And it was really nice that they used the term Latin, because if you want to get some more information about the Latin music legend forever stamps, there is a link at the bottom of the slide. You may absolutely use this. If you're curious, you want to know about each one of these celebrities, please feel free to look into it. You'll notice the date, September 15th through October 15th. Okay, like Maria just explained, these were dates that were, we have the specific date of the starting of September 15th through October 15th. So we're celebrating the Heritage Month from September 15th to October 15th. It's very important. And Maria and I are going to explain more to you about the happenings and the events that led up from September 15th to October 15th.
Again, we see that Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua, which are all a part of Central America, came together to break away from Spain. And the date of that is September 15th, 1821.
So Mexico, okay, we first sign for Mexico is Mexico, and it's like you're wiping your forehead, two coming out one time. Okay, so for the country of Mexico, I identify myself as Mexican. Why? Because I'm a very proud Mexicana.
Mexicana.
So you'll see that celebration starts on September 16th because our independence from Spain was September 16th, 1810. So that was a historical event that let us gain our independence from Spain. Okay, so here we have Miguel Hidalgo y Castella. His name sign is like a crooked three off the forehead. He was a Catholic priest, and he also was the father of the Mexican independence. Also, he led the famous, and you see the sentence there, it's the Grado de Dolores, the cry of Dolores. Okay, that's the translation of the cry of Dolores. So this is from Mexico. This is from his independence. And let me explain a little bit more about the story and the historical time period. Okay, so Miguel Hidalgo was noticing that there's a lot of happenings going on. You see that villages and pain and the sufferings of the people that Spain was inflicting onto Mexico. And it was happening for over the last 300 years. He was seeing the suffering that was happening. And he decided, you know what, it's time, it's enough. So what he did was he secretly got together in the church, started making plans and preparations. So then once they made that decision that they were going to go ahead and move forward, okay, they went to Dolores. They went into the church, set up some plans at the dead of night, midnight to be exact. They had rung the bell at the church. The bell just rang over the town. It was loud, such a loud ring. And then all the other towns in the area were hearing their bells, like, what's going on? What's happening? So all the families, friends, farmers, everybody gathered over to the land to look, to find out what was happening. Miguel Hidalgo stood and he gave a passionate speech telling his story, telling the story of the cries of Dolores, telling the stories of the suffering of the people, and just talking about it. The time is now. It's enough. We need to be free. Spain has taken over. We need to get together. We need to fight back, and we need to gain our independence from Spain. We need to be our own. And the people were all excited, pumped up, excited to go and gain their independence. They agreed, yes, we need to do this. We need to do this. So this event really inspired. They were very inspired by Miguel's story. Now, the first woman who was leading this march was, her name was Donna Josefia Ortiz
Or
Dominguez. And she was, wow, I don't know what to say, very inspirational woman. She was somebody who led her people. She was a strong Mexicana, native, a national hero. She risked her life, and she risked her life for many, many years. She ended up going into jail. She would release, go back to jail. They would release her. She'd end up back in jail. So for many years, she was in and out of jail. She had family. She had a lot of other responsibilities as well. So now remember, men at the time were, the first leaders, right? They were the ones who carried a little bit of status. So women were very oppressed at the time. So this is why we should really honor her. Okay, and it's not just her. There's many other leaders who gathered and fought through the independence of Spain. And she was the wife of Miguel Dominguez and the secretary of the royal court, and they were both imprisoned. And so Miguel said, "No, we're gonna have to keep moving forward, moving on, till, like I said, till the day that he had his speech at midnight." So on the 16th, that's when the war started with Spain. So people feel like, we should honor her and them because, like I said, remember, the people, the farmers, all the people that lived along the land, poor people, everybody that lived along the land didn't have enough weapons, guns, cannons. They didn't have any missiles to shoot across. They didn't have anything. They literally fought with the tools they had on their farm, like, their pitchforks, their farming tools. They used those to go in and fight and fight and fight and fight for their independence. And they had that 11-year war with Spain, many years of constant fighting and suffrage. And people are now honoring because of all the people that had died, from for their fight of independence. So there's a real sense of community and a pride, the fight to be able to get our independence from Spain. Okay, our celebrations. So the the federal government in Mexico, and this is at the plaza. They would all gather at the plaza, and they would have a huge. My goodness, the plaza is huge. All the people, all the town folks would come and watch the celebration. Now remember, the Dolores bell, the bell from the Dolores Church. They brought that over to Mexico, so that way we can celebrate and continue our tradition. And that's set now into the museum in Mexico. And the president would come in with the flag, present the colors. First, there used to be soldiers who would march down with the flags and present the flags, in honor and celebration. Then the president would take the flag and carry it the last leg so the people, the townspeople, can stand at the building and watch him. And everybody would look up at the president of the plaza. He would take the flag and he would show it in pride and bang it on the floor, bang the bell with the flag, okay, at the Grado de Dolores, and in honor and remembrance of the historical battle. People would look and they would say, "Viva Mexico! Celebrate!" They would be so happy. It wasn't your palms out; it was fist in the air, not palms out. It was "Viva." That's a sign for "Viva." It
yeah,
was just "Viva, Viva, Viva," and they would say
Mexico,
"Viva Mexico." Yeah,
Viva
Viva
Mexico.
Mexico, and it's over. They would cheer and cheer. The crowds would cheer. People would scream, and the president would shoot out the fireworks. It was a big display of just beautiful lights, and you'll see there's a lot of green, a lot of white, and a lot of red. And what those represents is the green means home, hope. I'm sorry, hope. The white indicates unity, the sense of community, the unity we feel. So we're a union. The red means the blood and the suffering, the heroes that spilled their blood in our history. So we say there's about the 15th to the 16th. So remember, this happened over 11 years. So we want to honor all those who spilled their blood in celebration. So we start, 11 midnight on the 11th. Next slide. Then the celebration continues. Then we have the 16th, where the people would march and parade, different groups, different cultures, military parades. We would see the indigenous, the Indians, Aztecs. You'll see all the different tribes and groups celebrating, dancing, doing their, dances, their traditional dances. So much happening. And remember, this is an area where there's lots of different celebrations because Mexico's so big. So big. We had a lot of different groups marching, celebrating, and that happens on the 16th. So schools, banks, government offices, businesses are all traditionally closed in celebration of the independence. So we have food. Can't have a celebration without food, right? Is it the same food throughout all of Mexico? There's different food all throughout the regions. Every region, every area would have their own food. My personal favorite is Pozole. Pozole, it's a corn soup, and then you have your chile, and then it's poured over with some sauce, and then you have the chile and
Enojada.
ordanga, and you see there's
Chile
different colors. There's green and there's white, and you see it represents the Mexican colors. You have the green, the red, and the white. So viva Mexico. Next slide.
Thank you so much, Maria. This is Rob speaking again. Talking about Cinco de Mayo. This is how you say it in American Sign Language. The 5th of May. As you can see, there's an image highlighting the Battle of Puebla. And this is the sign for Puebla right here, the Battle of Puebla. And I'd like to tell you about that battle. This is actually a French and Mexican war. Now, this is the same time that the American and the United States American Civil War was happening. Now, why did the French and Mexico end up in a war? Well, it turns out that the French had arrived to a couple different cities along the coast of Mexico, and Mexico did not have enough soldiers ready. They didn't have the equipment necessary to confront these soldiers. So there was a city called Puebla, where by the time the French arrived, the Mexican army was able to defeat them. And of course, the Mexican people at that time were overjoyed, and news spread throughout the Republic of Mexico. And it wasn't just soldiers that participated in that Battle of Puebla. Instead, there were a lot of farmers and rural folk that became involved. And they were able to defeat and do away with the French and not have to pay any taxes to them. And so there is a celebration in the United States, as you can see, it's indicated in the picture, of Cinco de Mayo, and that's how it's celebrated in the United States. And that was in 1863 for California, that Mexican Americans happened to notice St. Patrick's Day as a big celebration. It's known as, when you wear green or be pinched. And so the Mexican culture that noticed that Irish Americans had a celebration that celebrated their culture. And so a huge number of them in California decided they also wanted to have a holiday so that they could celebrate their identity. And they decided on Cinco de Mayo, on this date. Now, again, that was 1863. And in the year 1980, liquor companies decided to use this celebration to improve and benefit their own profits. Now, through that, there has been a campaign of misinformation where people believe that Cinco de Mayo and the Battle of Puebla celebrates Mexico's Independence Day. And that is not the case. Cinco de Mayo is, however, a historical marker in Mexico's history. And it's a time of momentous pride throughout the country because, again, grassroots people came together with the soldiers to fight against the French and defeated them. However, Cinco de Mayo has now become popular by its Americanization. And it's now at a state where people in the United States dress up in their ponchos and their hats, and they typically drink alcohol or alcoholic drinks. They'll have Tecate, Coronas, tequila, and so on and so on. And it has become a celebration where people have tacos. And there's a sense that it's not the appropriate way to acknowledge and recognize the historical Battle of Puebla or Cinco de Mayo. The folks who were a part of the battle are the ones that should be celebrated and honored. Cinco de Mayo is not treated as a holiday with fanfare in Mexico. Mexico celebrates September 16th as the Day of Independence.
Chile. So Chile celebrates on September 18th, 1880, from their independence from Spain. Belize, they gained their independence on September 21st, 1981, and they gained their independence from the United Kingdom. And we'll talk more about Belize later. Christopher Columbus has lots of name signs. We have C from the shoulder. We have CC. There's many signs. But today, I'm going to use this as Christopher Columbus, just for the sake of this presentation. Okay, so Christopher Columbus Day. And we have Mexican
De la Raza Day. Dia de la Raza, which is a day that honors Columbus Day in the month of Hispanic Heritage Month. Now, Christopher Columbus is a person who sailed across the Atlantic and found the New World, which are known as the Americas. Now, he first arrived in the area known as Cuba, and that was in October 12th, 1492. Now, I'd like to share with you folks, pilgrims had arrived soon before that and well before that. So Christopher Columbus was part of the Spanish community because he worked with the Queen of Spain and the nobles as an ambassador that was to travel, capture information, and return it to the Queen. And so there's three main reasons for Columbus's travels. Now, he did venture back and forth 4 times. The first time was in search of gold and material possessions from the Americas, which they found and took. Now, a second trip was made for the Spanish language. Now, of course, at that time, Europe had a variety of languages. And so what they wanted was an area, what Spain wanted was to colonize the entire world into using the Spanish language. So on the continent known as Latin America, they came a second time to spread that language. And then there was a third voyage made, and this for the Roman Catholic Church. And that was made to perform conversions on indigenous people. Now, Spain, the country, of course, has an extreme reverence for Columbus, Christopher Columbus, and celebrates Christopher Columbus Day, which is typically an annual celebration held on October 12th. In the United States, it's the Spanish, Latin, and other communities, plus the Italian communities who celebrate Columbus Day. And that day is on the second Monday of October, again, also on an annual basis. So those are the 2 dates associated with Columbus. And I want to remind folks about September 15th to October 15th. There's, of course, a variety of dates and a couple days that we celebrate. We do celebrate Independence Day. Columbus Day is also included there. And it's not like there's a goal to erase the word Hispanic. It's been in use historically, and we need to acknowledge that. However, we can also acknowledge acts of resistance that happened along the way. Now, in the 90s, Hispanic became a popular, extremely popular term. However, prior to that, in the 1960s, there was a discussion in the American government, and for purposes of the census, they had to categorize groups. For example, they had the categories Asian, Caucasian, or white, and they weren't sure what to do with a certain demographic. And so, of course, through Congress, they decided to separate these groups into different types. One was Mexican, another was Puerto Rican, and Cuban. And so this was aimed again specifically for light-skinned individuals. And for those individuals, the identifying word Hispanic was chosen, which upset the Latin American community. And the Latin American community decided to start a grassroots movement by people of color, including Black and brown folks, because of course they weren't satisfied with the decision that was made by Congress. So they elected to use the word Latino or Latina as a group. Now again, Congress and the federal government, recognizing this, decided to administer both terms in their documentation for the census, and that being Hispanic and Latino or Latina. And I'd like to say that there have been further acts of resistance along this journey, and we will be covering them in further slides.
Okay, this is Maria. For Indigenous Peoples Day, so we have, people that we need to recognize, people we need to acknowledge and celebrate these people. Okay, it's not Columbus's celebration. We need to change this into Indigenous Peoples Day to celebrate the indigenous people of the time, because we need to remember those people. We need to honor and respect those people. We'll get more into that a little bit later in future slides.
I'd like to cover now indigenous people of Latin America. There's a whole array and myriads of tribes. As you can see, I've listed on the slide here. I'd like to cover the 3 bolded terms, Aztec, Maya, and Inca, which of course are very significant tribes historically. Aztec indicates people in the Mexico area, and then Maya covers people more from the Central American area, and Incas cover from the south part of America. And they were almost decimated by Spain and their ventures. However, we are happy to say that these communities are vibrantly alive today. As you can see, we've listed their names out there. Also, Black Lives Matter is important. I'd like to mention that before the protests or acts of resistance, Californians were upset about statues of Christopher Columbus before any protests happened. Now that we're in the age of common protests, the statues are being vandalized and people would like them removed from their positions. And there's a growing consensus that Christopher Columbus should not be honored and celebrated. And I like to add that it's not just the Black community, but also the brown, people of color communities that are coming together hand in hand with this aim. Now we're showing images here, and one is of Junipero Serra. Now Junipero Serra was a Roman Catholic priest that upon arriving in California established one of the first missions in the San Diego area, and then moved further north to the San Francisco area and kept establishing missions along the way. And what happened is, again, unease appeared in the Latin people of California. Now, I'd like to say that prior to, Hispanic people were very respectful and very reverent to Father Junipero Serra. He was a Californio, and so he had started the church at that time. But many of the community members disagreed with him because they would destroy indigenous artifacts, indigenous language, indigenous ways of life, and impose on them a conversion to Catholicism. And so what happened is the Latin community and Black Lives Matter have decided that Junipero Serra is not deserving of these honors that we've given him. And so there's also a renewed focus to tear his statues down as well. We'd also like to recognize and identify that Black individuals have lived alongside Latin American folks. They are not forgotten. Because of the use of the term Latin, it doesn't mean that we leave out folks that have that Afro diaspora in their history. Now, there are, I'd like to say, many folks that are Black in Latin American countries that are fluent in Spanish. And you can see, I can point out here, Nelson Estupiñán Vaz, again, a very proud Afro-Ecuadorian poet who was very supportive to the community. And then we have Celia Cruz also on our slide, and she is known as the Queen of Latin Music. And also Vicente Ramón Guerrero Saldaña. Now this is his name sign right here. It looks like a sideburn. He is the second president of Mexico, and he identified as Black. And again, he is a very important person in our history because he prohibited and banned slavery within the country of Mexico. He ended that practice. That was done before Abraham Lincoln ended slavery. So he was a true pioneer. Again, first Black Mexican president on the North American continent at that time.
Okay, so we have to proceed. So Latin America, we have the Latin American countries. This is a sign for Latin America. So there's 22 countries, all that encompass Latin America. You'll see them all in green on the map. And there's a little bit more that we can consider, but let's go ahead. Like Maria was just saying, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, what Maria just said, Belize celebrated their independence on September 7th, or 1822. Now, it's not recognized in Hispanic Heritage Month. And that reason is because Brazil, as a country, didn't break away from the Portuguese. The language that they use is Portuguese. And so they don't recognize that. But we do recognize Brazil as a part of Latin America. The Latin community does recognize them.
Okay, you see the government in California, the Governor Newsom, he decided to go ahead and declare a declaration of Latino Heritage Month. Okay, and that's what we celebrate in California. If you want some more information about that, you can see there's a little link at the bottom. Click the link, explore, see, and get all the information you want. And you'll see that the term Latino was used, okay, for Latino Heritage Month.
HRC has adopted the term, but let me tell you first who HRC is. That's the Human Rights Campaign. And again, they've adopted the preferred term as Latinx because it is fully inclusive and leaves no one out. And they use Latinx Heritage Month on their publications, as you can see shown on the screen. It's important to acknowledge celebrating Latin culture for a month shouldn't be what we do. It should be a year-round event, and we should have celebrations for all folks. For example, my family celebrates in San Diego at Chicano Park, at the Chicano Park Day celebration, which is a very well known celebration because in the community of Logan Heights, San Diego, that park is in an area that's heavily populated by Chicanos. And that was a neighborhood that was done away with in order to build a freeway and an overpass to the freeway. And so a lot of the Chicano community was devastated when this happened. And they thought of setting up or establishing a park in that area. And there was a heavy policing of the area. So the community members were upset and demanded from the local government a park. And this park was granted and was opened April 22nd, 1970. So this is also a celebration that we have in San Diego. And like I said, there are many year-round celebrations to be had throughout our country.
Okay, so we have community guidelines here. So if you're going to choose to sign your question, please follow these guidelines. It's very important that we respect one another, honor people's experiences. Okay, and if you would like you to be open to learning, okay, do not be biased. And remember, a shared experience should also come from an I statement. We're not accusing. We're not going to put blame. There's no finger pointing. It's I statements only. Thank you. Follow these guidelines for your Q&As.
Right.
Wow.
That was so
Okay,
nice.
I feel like I learned a lot today. Woo. All right. It's very important information that we have. We do have a few questions from the audience. And our first question is, if a person's parents are white and the other parent is Mexican, and because of their different heritage and backgrounds, what do we call them? How do we label them?
This is Roberto. I'd like to respond.
Robs?
Right. I think that child would still be able to be called a Mexican Now, depending on the area where you live, like let's say, for example, if they live in Mexico, and right, the father is Mexican and the mother is light skinned or white, and they live in Mexico, all of them together, then they can still be called a Mexican. Even if the person is born in the United States, they can identify as Mexican American, Chicano, or whatever identity they would like to identify as. But it's nice to just
because
recognize when a person has. Maria?
I'd like to add something. Um, and they can explain themselves. We don't get to label and explain people's experiences or backgrounds. We don't get to do that. We can't do that. So you can explain your own, your own history. Be proud of who you are. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, Rob's.
Yeah, I'd like to add something very important. Maria, you're spot on. Cultural identity is an experience. It's something that you internalize as you grow. Now, the challenge with deaf children is that communication gap. And that's where we need support and advocacy from the deaf Latin community to fill that gap. Thank you so much.
And you could also take, you have to use full, you disclose all information. Maria here, you have to take the time, meet deaf people, um, Mexican people, take the time, interact, introduce them to your experiences, share your experiences. Okay. It's very important that we talk about our experiences so we can inspire children to identify who they are. Yes, definitely, Kavita here. Definitely. It's definitely a benefit to those children. Agreed. Second question. Okay, so if a person, whether it's a he or she, goes to the Manos Day Council conference, so is that person, maybe they look white, like they're Mexican, but they look white because maybe their parents are biracial. Now, does the co-chairperson at the conference does not accept them or her, and why would they or would they not? Rob's, I need time to
You know,
think.
I'm Manos de Council, Council de Manos, and I'm not familiar with this situation. Uh, I'd like to explain that Council de Manos is the national organization that's open to the public. We do not close to anyone except for our community meetings. Now, the community meetings are considered our business
Yes,
meetings,
absolutely.
and that is a sacred space. So, if you would like to disclose your identity as a Mexican and you happen to have a light skin appearance, that's fine. You're welcome. There's no barriers to that. But I'd like to say, let's say, for example, there are also Asian slash Mexicans. There are also African slash Mexicans. And we don't reject or keep anyone out. And we are not limiting those groups to
Right.
either.
Right.
You have identify with two cultures. That's just marvelous. You're a beautiful person
Kavita,
and
yes,
we accept you.
I agree. I agree. Maria, yes, I agree too. Question number 3. They say, wow, this is a wonderful story. Um, I have a student who doesn't really talk about their country's independence. They, maybe they just don't realize the purpose of why they're celebrating heritage. So I think maybe would you be willing to videotape yourself so you can share your story for our youth? So they would definitely benefit from the knowledge about their own heritage. What do you guys think? Maria here. Yes, definitely. Definitely. Robs, would you be willing to? What do you think?
Uh,
Robs?
I would, yeah, I think it'd be nice if you folks reach out to me. Today, we're on a live presentation because of the COVID pandemic. And I think it's important when you upload information because you want to capture that audience in sign language. And a live session is really nice because of that interaction and that back and forth sharing of information. But if anyone's available for me to provide a
Yes.
presentation, I'd be more than
I
happy to
agree.
do so.
Yes. Yes. Contact us, please. I would look forward to it, please. Yes. Kavita here. Yes, definitely. Definitely. I think it would be a very good idea. Absolutely. Okay, I do have one more person who wants to sign their question. So let's get them on Zoom here. I'm waiting for them to come in. Anybody? Abby? No? All right, it seems that person disappeared on us. Darn. Oh well, what a bummer. Such a bummer. Okay, yes, it is a bummer. All right, well, I want to thank you both for being here at our CAD council and the two interpreters. They were here by GLAD. They were sponsored by GLAD. So On Air Productions gave us the platform to work with. So let's thank On Air Productions. Thank you all for watching. Now, I want to remind everybody for the next 2 Thursdays, this coming up Thursday and the following Thursday. So we have two CAD conferences that we're not going to be having our meetings because we're going to have our statewide meeting. And so we encourage you guys to go. We will come back to you guys and report what's happening at our council. And the second week, the CAD Council of Representatives at the NAD conference that we do biannually, and we're all going to be going out there for their meeting. So hats off to them. So I will see you all on October the 10th. All right. So we're going to have an exciting presenter. Watch our flyers for our next presenter. Thank you, everybody. Good evening. Good night. Bye-bye. Bye. Thank you. Thank you.